It's been months since this happened, but it was on my mind today, and I couldn't believe I didn't post it sooner. Back in the winter, I had returned home to New York City and was getting used to the usual schlep on the subway to get to and from work and around the city in general. I hate the subway, as an overarching statement towards the MTA. I had always called it the bane of my existence, because it challenged me in all the areas I'm sensitive about. Close proximity to strangers, claustrophobic spaces, temperature extremes, and mysteriously foul smells. Overall, it's convenient and tolerable on a good day, but I still had my fair share of unfortunate encounters over the years that led me to regard the subway as a less than ideal mode of transportation around the city. This one early evening on a Sunday solidified my thinking. I had just left a breast cancer fundraiser event at around 7 p.m. and was only going a few stops over to where my house was on the N train. My little sister and I began chatting quietly as the train began to move. A medium-built black man in a gray pea coat and beanie made eye contact with me and hurried over. He bent down close to my face, extending his arm out for a handshake, and said, "Hello there. You're very beautiful. How you doing? What's your name?" I sort of recoiled back, giving him a confused, "what are you doing in my personal space" kind of look, shaking my head in clear disinterest to make his acquaintance. All of a sudden, it was like a switch flipped, and his previously sweet tone turned immediately to an ugly rage. "You fucking bitch. You think you're better than everybody? You ain't shit, you ugly bitch. Fuck out of here, you clown-ass bitch." He screamed out at the top of his lungs, and I noticed everyone turning and staring in our direction. He made a waving off gesture, while I just kind of sat there, staring at him wide-eyed and wondering what he was going to do next. His entire stance had turned very aggressive. He then stopped screaming, and to my surprise made a direct pass to try the exact same thing on my sister, who was sitting right next to me. "Wow, you're beautiful too. Can I shake your hand?" He reached directly next to me to touch her. The fucking nerve. I extended my arm and said firmly, "Hey, leave my sister alone and back up out of our space." This guy smacks my hand out of the way. Now he's fully pushed my buttons. I stand up and realize that I'm about eye level with him, so he must have been about 5'9", maybe 5'11" at most. "Don't fucking touch my sister," I said, and I was now officially heated. This part is a blur, as I don't remember what he said when he pushed me and we began to scuffle, but I landed a very sweet uppercut on his jaw. This enraged him, and he had me on my back within seconds, kicking me and screaming, "I'll fucking kill you." After what felt like an eternity, 2 good people of the subway had run up behind him and grabbed him off of me. I heard one man say, "Leave her alone, dude, what the fuck?" When I looked up, I saw several horrified passengers staring at us, as we had engaged in a full-on brawl. Adrenaline was pumping through my veins, so everything was bright and my vision was pinpoint, and I felt numb. The conductor said something over the speakers about holding the train at the platform, and I stood there shaking as the men threw him onto the platform and made a barrier between the platform and the door, as he attempted to force his way back in the car, clawing at the air and sputtering curses at me while staring me dead in the eye. The subway doors finally closed, locking him out. He pounded on the doors, as though possessed by a demon, screaming so loud you could see every sinew in his neck popping out as he pounded on the glass. His eyes were so bloodshot they almost turned red, and his voice pierced through the entire car. "I'll kill you, bitch." Then the subway car pulled away from the station. Someone pointed to the ground. He had dropped his cell phone in the altercation, and it was unlocked. I found out everything that I could about this crazed stranger. His name, his social media handles, saw his selfies, the fact that he had been trying very hard and was unsuccessful at getting laid. His text messages revealed that he was a drug dealer of some sort. I suspected crack because of the prices, increments, and wording of the texts, which would also explain his random violent outburst. I had seen my fair share of crazy in New York City, but I hadn't gotten up this close and personal in years. I was very shook and emotional following the attack. I went to the police station with my aunt and uncle soon after, and I was filing a report when one of the cops at the station says, "If it turns out you stole this phone from this guy, you're going to be in a lot of trouble." Dead ass straight to my face, implies that I stole this phone from a complete stranger on the subway and was now spinning some elaborate web that included turning myself in at the police station when I was filing a report of an assault. I wasn't wrong in thinking that this guy wasn't going to be much help. I digress. I gave them his full name, and they said they had a lot of people in the system with the same name. Well, I have all the specific info I got off the phone. They said they couldn't use anything off the phone without a warrant. They ended up taking his cell phone from me, and nothing ever really came of it, except the ginormous bruise I had from getting a bunch of kicks to the thigh. An officer came by my house a few months later with some photos of extremely similar-looking black men, none of which I could confidently identify as my assailant. I haven't heard a single thing since I filed the report, and I couldn't find the guy on social media ever again. So, this lunatic is out there, probably riding the subway somewhere waiting for the next girl to reject a handshake so he can go absolutely batshit crazy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened had it been late at night with nobody around to help me. That guy was screaming that he was going to kill me, and I'm sure he would have, given the chance. I lived a pretty sheltered life as a child. I'm an only child, and as is sometimes the case with only children, I lived an extremely overprotected life. My mom drilled stranger danger in my head since preschool, and would always stress the importance of being safe. Never go into a bathroom by yourself, never get into a stranger's car, never drink from an open bottle, always ask for permission, and always stay within an adult's eyesight. I have to admit that half the time it went in one ear and out the other. As a preteen, I thought I knew it all, and hated the constant nagging. However, I get where she was coming from now. My mom was a recent widow, and was adjusting to the role of mom and dad, trying to shield me from the horrors that I'm only now beginning to see. We lived in an area that used to be a quaint little dairy town, but over the years had gone downhill and become crime-ridden. The dairy farm had fallen out of business, and in its place they constructed new homes. It wasn't a bad place to live, but it wasn't the best either. I grew up thinking it was a common occurrence to hear helicopters fly by, announcing that they were looking for someone. The cross street from my house led to a park that was known for gang activity, where almost every weekend someone would either be found dead or beat up, but it was okay because we didn't live on that end of the street. We knew most of the neighbors, and if we didn't know them by name, at least knew what they looked like. Despite not being the best neighborhood, it was pretty quiet and we felt safe. By the time I was in 7th grade, I finally had gotten some freedoms. My best friend Tiffany and I would take turns spending the night at each other's houses, but most of the time she would come to mine. Tiffany had a little brother that would always pester us, and she liked coming over to my house because we could talk about boys without her little brother trying to eavesdrop. I think my mom preferred it that way too, because she was much more lenient with us knowing we were safe at our house. She would sometimes even go on her daily walks and leave us home by ourselves for an hour or more, and we loved it. I'm not sure what we happened to do on this particular day. Probably ate pizza, sat on my front porch outside as the sun set, and listened to the radio at way too high of a volume. Perhaps this was even one of those nights my mom left us home alone for a while. I wish I could say I saw something out of the ordinary or felt uneasy, but I didn't. After it got dark, we retreated to my room. My room has 2 windows. One faces the backyard and the other faces the street. I like natural light as much as possible, so as usual, the blinds were open. Even though it was now dark outside, which meant people could see in but we couldn't see out, I still left them fully open. I was too lazy to climb onto my bed to close them, and had a false sense of security knowing there was a tall pine tree directly in front of my window. With the tree in front of my window, I felt protected, almost as if my room was invisible to the outside world. As the night grew quieter, we decided to build a fort out of sheets and tell scary stories. By this time, it was really late at night, and my mom was fast asleep in her room. After the first story or two, I started to grow uneasy and got up to close the blinds. I was creeped out, thinking someone could be lurking outside, peeking in, but I figured it was all in my head because of the stories we were telling. We got through a couple more classic stories, and started talking about true ghost stories, things that relatives claimed they had seen or heard. Our eyes were watery, hearts pounding, muscles clenched, when suddenly there was a loud, furious banging on my bedroom window. It wasn't a knock that grew into a series of louder knocks. It was an angry knock that you felt through your body. My heart was pounding in sync with each subsequent knock. I sat there frozen, not knowing what to do. My mind was frantically trying to make sense of the situation. It just didn't make sense that someone would be knocking on my bedroom window so late at night. We have an iron gate that surrounds our house, and it's pretty loud. I was surprised that we hadn't even heard the gate open. Even then, the door is 5 feet from the gate. Why didn't they knock on the door first? My room is all the way in the back, and wasn't even the first window with the light on. You pass by 2 other windows before you get to mine. A million questions running through my head, and my brain comes to the only possible conclusion. It's Tiffany's little brother trying to scare us. Yeah, because it makes sense that a 10-year-old boy walked over to my house in the middle of the night to scare us. In what felt like ages, but must have only been a matter of seconds, I finally came to the realization that it wasn't her little brother. The knocks continued. They were loud and angry, yet no one was saying anything. We were both frozen in fear. I just wanted to stay hidden in the fort where I couldn't be seen. What if whoever was knocking was peeking in through the cracks in the blinds and watched me as I crawled out from under the sheets? The thought of it made my every muscle weak. And then suddenly silence. The knocking had stopped. I felt my body ease up a bit. Maybe whoever was there had left. And cue teenage brain. We decided to go investigate. My mom was blissfully unaware of what was going on, still fast asleep. We slid out of the fort and tiptoed down the hallway towards the front door. Adrenaline pumped through our body as we decided one of us would sneak to the front door and look out the peephole or window to see if we could see something. Neither one of us wanted to be the one to do it, but it was my house, so I volunteered. All the doors were locked. The windows have bars on them. I just had to be as quiet as possible. Beneath every step I took, the wood creaked and groaned. After a few minutes, I found myself standing at the front door. My whole torso felt numb as I inched my face closer to the peephole. Holding my breath, I look out, and I suddenly felt hot and cold at the same time. I didn't know whether to keep looking out or slink back down slowly. I think a little part of me had convinced myself that the porch would be empty that night. but instead, standing on my porch was an unfamiliar man. I have no idea who this man is, but he's standing uncomfortably close to the door. Something about this just didn't seem right. What threw me off the most was that he was pounding on my window just 15 or so minutes ago, and now he was standing at the front door so quietly and calm. It was as if the roaring avalanche had turned into a falling feather. With my stomach in my throat, I snuck back to the hallway where Tiffany was waiting for me. All I could muster was, "There's a man out there." Immediately, she says, "Go tell your mom." It wasn't a question, it was a demand. We ran into her room and urgently told her that someone was knocking. She must have sensed the urgency in my voice, because she sprung up and told us to stay in her room with the door closed, and instructed us not to open the door no matter what happened. We stood behind the door for what seemed like ages, just trying to listen. The front door was too far away, so all we heard was silence. We finally hear footsteps coming towards us. It was so quiet around us that I could hear my own heartbeat pound in my ears. I just about had a heart attack when my mom's bedroom door started swinging open. It was my mom. She told us not to worry about it, that the man had gone away. This left me with a million questions, but she was very vague. What did he want? Nothing. Who was he? I don't know. She shooed us back to bed and we complied. The adrenaline had started to wear off and now I was exhausted. We didn't stay up to speculate or talk. That was that, and it was the end of the story. For now. The next day I was sitting in my room and hear my mom talking to someone. I've always been a very quiet kid. Even as a baby, people would often forget I was around. I'm quiet, but I hear everything. I stopped what I was doing, probably downloading music on Napster or something, and listened as close as possible. My mom was telling her friend about the man. Apparently, she had opened the door and through the screen asked the man if he needed any help. The man had stammered, as if trying to think up a story, and introduced himself as her neighbor. He said that his mom was sick, and was going around asking for money to help buy her medicine. Concerned, but also trying to poke holes at his story, my mom asked him what her name was, in case my mom knew her. The guy didn't give her an answer, and then pointed in a general direction, saying that they lived in that house over there. My mom didn't buy it. She knew everyone that lived near us, and she had never seen this man before. She probably should have just closed the door at this point, and told him she didn't have any money on her, but she didn't want to piss him off. She didn't know if he was armed or dangerous, and thought maybe he was just a junkie and would run off if she gave him some cash. Luckily she had fallen asleep in her clothes, so as she reached in her back pocket she found $5, change from the pizza we had ordered earlier. She unlocked the screen door and handed him the cash. The man started getting more aggressive and growls. "That's all you have?" Now my mom was starting to sense something more sinister in the man. He was not just a junkie, or if he was a very aggressive one. My mom then lies to him and quickly tells the man that, yes, this is all I have. We live day to day here, and $5 is actually even more than I should spare, but your mom is sick and I feel bad. She definitely needs this money more than we do right now. Not satisfied by her answer, he continues to demand more cash. My mom realizes that this man is not taking no for an answer, and begins to bluff. She says that she'll go tell her husband. Maybe he has some cash on him. We don't have any cash, but maybe my husband does. I would hate to leave a neighbor in need. Your mom must really need that medicine. At once the man's demeanor changes, and he mutters, "No, that's okay," and treks out of there. I don't know what would have happened if the man had called her on her bluff, but thinking a man was present scared the hell out of the guy enough to drive him away. Fast. I grew cold, thinking that he probably thought me and Tiffany were home alone. He must have been watching us and planning on breaking in. Cue teenage brain. Oh well, he's gone. Gotta download that Usher album, I guess. Disclaimer. I'm not sure if this following event was related, but due to its close proximity to the previous one, I think it's worth mentioning. The following week, I was waiting for Tiffany's mom to pick me up to go to school. We lived 2 houses away, so they would always swing by for me in the morning. I usually would be done getting ready before they arrived, so I would head outside to the front yard and wait for them there. Sometimes I'd go climb the tree in the front and look for bird eggs. Other times I'd search for 4-leaf clovers. I was walking around, not paying any attention to my surroundings, but I hear what can only be described as what I would imagine a gun with a silencer sounds like. It was a quiet little pew, followed by a loud noise, which I later realized was glass breaking. Stunned, I looked around. What the hell was that? All I saw was a white van drive by. I looked over at my neighbor's house and noticed the window to their car was completely shattered, shards of glass everywhere. I still didn't quite put 2 and 2 together until I saw the same white van drive by, the driver staring me down. I felt a sense of unease and wanted to run back inside. For some reason, though, I didn't. I had too much pride and didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they had scared me. Also, I thought if I ran inside, they maybe would think I was a snitch and retaliate. I played dumb as if I didn't notice anything. They drove by again, and once more after that. I tried not to look at the van as it drove by, but each time it did, I could feel the driver's gaze upon me. Soon after, Tiffany's mom came by and took me to school. I don't know if the van drove by a 4th time. I never told anyone about it. Luckily, nothing ever happened again after that. I'll preface this story by saying it's a long one, but as they say, the devil's in the details. And this is by far the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, and I haven't shared it with many people. Even though it's happened over half a decade ago, I still have nightmares about it. I still have the journal I kept at the time, so the details are always fresh in my mind. For a bit of context, I was a pretty stereotypical troubled youth / young adult. Dropped out of college after being sexually assaulted, turned to drugs for comfort, that sort of thing. When I was 19, I decided to leave home, the USA, and get a job teaching English halfway across the world. I spent over a year working and traveling in Central Asia / the Middle East. Living in the region as a single woman was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Men tormented me relentlessly. I was groped almost every day on the bus and metro. They followed me home and to work, yelled at me on the streets, shoved money in my face asking for sex. I could go on. After about a year of this, I'd gotten really good at handling situations like these, and had developed a false sense of confidence. At the end of the year, I decided to backpack through Turkey. As Turkey has a reputation of being safer than the other countries I'd been living in, I felt very confident going into the trip that I could keep myself safe. To save money and make friends, I decided to couch surf in Istanbul with a lovely woman I had met online. One Friday night, I'd been staying with her for a couple of weeks at this point. We went to a party together. Before the party, she gave me a ticket to a concert happening the following day, saying she decided she didn't want to go after all. At the party, I met a man who said he also had a ticket to the concert and offered to give me a ride. I jumped at the opportunity, as Istanbul is pretty massive. Plus, I didn't have a smartphone, so navigating the city was really difficult. The next day, I met him at a coffee shop. The man was older than I had remembered from the party. I thought it was a little weird that this guy, who must have been close to 40, had a ticket to this girly pop band. I should have listened to my gut. He started hitting on me right off the bat, but not in an overly creepy way. No problem, I thought. I could just ditch him when I got to the concert. When we got in the car and started driving, he got even creepier. By the time we got onto the highway, he had escalated to maximum creepy. He started groping my thighs, saying things like, "All American girls are sluts, right? You guys love the attention." I stopped talking then, not sure what to do. His demeanor shifted, and he became much more threatening. He started groping me even more, to the point where he'd even hurt a little. He kept asking me questions to keep me talking. "You like this, right? You slut. Dumb bitch. I'll bet you only like guys that are in bands." Turns out that he was in a band. That sort of thing. By his tone and body language, I knew saying fuck off wasn't an option. I realized then how much bigger he was than me. I'm a small person, 5'2" and 115 pounds. He was 6 feet and probably around 200. After 30 minutes of highway driving, I asked him how much further away the venue was. He laughed and said that he knew somewhere much more fun than the venue. I begged him to stop the car, saying I had a ticket to the concert and really wanted to go. I hoped I could charm him into pulling over, but that just made him angry. We rode for another hour in silence. I weighed my options. Jump from the car at 70 miles per hour, or make a run for it once he stops. I opted to wait for him to stop. At this point, we were no longer in the city. It was late into the evening, nearly dark, when he pulled into a driveway. We seemed to be in the outskirts of a village, or perhaps an undeveloped suburb. His home was a small apartment building, with an empty lot and construction site on either side. There were more apartments further down the highway, but too far to get to without him catching me first. He herded me out of the car, saying his apartment was really fun and that he had a ton of cocaine upstairs. Me, a recovering addict, stupidly did what he said, and to this day I don't know why. I went full-on lamb to the slaughter. I didn't see any choice, and I hoped that if I did what he said, he'd let me go. He led me upstairs to the 6th floor and into his apartment. This is when it got really weird. He seemed to have it in his head that I was his date. He offered me a drink and asked if I wanted to listen to music and the like. I said no and that I wanted to leave, but no matter what I said, he acted like I had said yes. He kept groping me on the couch, asking me to take my clothes off. I kept saying no, and tried to deflect his advances with niceties and jokes. He played along at first, but after a few lines of blow and a couple of beers, he was pretty over it. He started saying I was an ugly whore, and that I should feel lucky that he even found me attractive. He got bolder and angrier, started ranting about how all women were stupid sluts, especially American women. He had his hands under my clothes at this point, reminding me of how grateful I should be to have his attention. He offered me more booze and drugs, and at that point I didn't refuse. I did a few lines of blow, which did little to appease my terror, but in a way snapped my stupid deer-in-the-headlights brain back into focus. After over an hour of this, I knew that if I didn't escape now, I probably wouldn't ever. This guy was batshit and out of his mind on blow and booze. After a few years, he got up to take a piss. I'm sitting in the far corner of his living room, the furthest point from the front door. The bathroom is pretty much halfway between the front door and the corner I'm sitting in. From where I'm sitting, it was a straight shot to the door, but I had to pass the bathroom on the way. I hear him start pissing while the bathroom door is open, and I decide to seize the chance. thank you, cocaine, for giving me the balls to run for my life, because God knows what would have happened to me if I didn't take that chance. I bolted. I heard him yell something from the bathroom as I ran past, but I didn't look. I threw open the front door, bolted to the stairs, and practically jumped down all 6 flights. Outside it was pitch black, but I could see the glow of the apartments and a convenience store down the highway. I wasn't sure if I could make it without him catching me, so after running a short distance, I jumped into the fields next to the highway and hid. I waited until I felt confident that he either wasn't in pursuit or had given up. I jogged for maybe a quarter mile to the convenience store. I must have looked like hell, because a middle-aged woman immediately came up to me. My Turkish was rudimentary at best, but I was able to convey that I needed a taxi to the nearest bus stop. She called one for me, and I took the bus into the city and made it in time to take the last metro back to my host's apartment. I didn't sleep at all that night. I wrote in my journal, and weirdly, didn't cry at all. I caught the first bus out of Istanbul the next day. I didn't start crying until halfway through the bus ride.